Good afternoon and welcome to this public scrutiny session, which is being held today in the Council Chamber in Runcorn Town Hall, with members of the public also joining online. These sessions are a vital part of how we provide transparency and accountability to the public of Cheshire. They allow us to test assurance, explore risk, and make sure that policing across our area is delivering against the priorities that matter most to local communities. Since our last scrutiny cycle, I have refreshed my policing crime plan. This is not a completely new plan, and it's not a change for the sake of change. It is a reality check of the previous plan and taking account of changing demands of policing. What has worked well, what challenges remain, and what the public have told me matters most to them. The refreshed plan is designed to ensure that priorities remain relevant, deliverable, and focused on outcomes. It provides a clear framework against which I can continue to hold the Chief Constable to account on behalf of the people of Cheshire. Today, we will examine a number of important operational areas, including public complaints, use of force, emergency response performance, domestic abuse, sexual offences, neighbourhood policing, and public confidence. As usual, I will be the only person asking questions so that those watching can clearly understand both what is being examined and why it matters. Brilliant. Here in the room today, we have our Chief Constable, Deputy Chief Constable, and Head of Performance Monitoring. Can we now move to the minutes? And I'd like to propose that we approve the minutes of the previous public scrutiny meeting. Thank you. And can we now move to the slide relating to staff numbers? I'm going to move straight to slide 34, where I want to discuss the issue of PCSOs that were discussed at the previous session. This is something that has been raised repeatedly in a number of forums, including most recently at the Police and Crime panel on Friday. And in fact, I've specifically invited interested parties to dial into today's meeting because there is significant public interest in hearing this discussion. I've expressed concern about the direction of travel for PCSO numbers, and unfortunately the picture appears to have worsened. My understanding is that we're down to 49 now, as is shown on the slides that the public have access to, and not all of those officers are deployable. I've been very clear publicly that this situation is unacceptable, and in fact I've said that we don't start to see meaningful improvements. We will be looking at council tax changes, and that residents are quite rightly expecting to see visible neighbourhood policing presence in their communities. With that, I'd like to say, Chief Constable, can you explain what is being done urgently and specifically to increase PCSO numbers? And perhaps most importantly, can residents realistically expect to see these numbers moving back in the right direction?
Yeah, as you highlight, I've had numerous conversations about this, and obviously it was a point of some discussion around the last budget setting time. As we've explained, there's some variable factors, and we acknowledge the good work that PCSOs do in the community. The variable factors are around the money, being able to afford them, together with the other things that we need to deliver for the public, but also having a viable number for a course. It's not cost effective to do a course for 2 or 3 people. We've had numerous discussions about it, the situation that we're in now. Obviously, we're at July. The new financial year has been running for 4 months. So we get great clarity on the funds that are going to be available to us. Deputy Chief Constable's done a good deal of work with both your CFO and our CFO reviewing various assumptions and the like. So we've had great clarity on the financial picture. It's likely to unwind in the rest of the financial year. Allied to that, we've got a better idea about the attrition of the PCSOs as we go into the year, so we work out when we estimate there will be a sufficient cohort for us to run a cost-effective course. At the moment, we are looking to run a recruitment exercise in September, which should bring additional PCSOs into the force at the start of the new calendar year, which should bring them back up to the number that I think we've agreed will be the one we'd aspire to for this year.
Look, can I say, first and foremost, that is great news. It's hugely welcomed by me as the voice of the public, but I think more broadly, the scrutiny that has been applied onto this and the concern that has been raised, I think we have to respect the fact that the Constabulary are absolutely making the decisions to recruit from September. I think that will put a significant number of people in this county at ease, and it means that we don't have to consider the changes to council tax that I spoke publicly about, but it does mean that we're getting on with the job, which I think is what people care the most about. So thank you very much for making those commitments today for the public. Certainly those who've dialed in, many of them have a very strong interest in this particular area of today's scrutiny session. Since we're on neighbourhood policing, I'm just going to stay there, but can we move to slide 5, which is the compliance with the 122 promise and a named officer and PCSO in each area. What is that compliance at the moment?
Yeah, 100%.
100%?
Yeah.
I mean, look, I like simple answers to what are often complex questions, right? Because I think the public understandably see lots of things online and chatter that takes place in communities. But for you to give that compliance that we have 122 named officers and PCSOs in our areas, I think is a really important certainty from the Constabulary. Are you doing everything you can to support PCSOs with necessary training? I think you've sort of answered my next question already by saying that there is going to be that training in September. But another area which there is interest in is around abstraction levels. I think that is a term that's used in policing which the public might not necessarily understand, but it is really where neighbourhood officers are moved from there to deal with other incidents. And of course, there's always going to be examples where that happens. But what is the abstraction level for neighbourhood policing in Q1, and how does that compare against the agreed target and with previous periods?
So, in relation to just going back, it's 100%. I checked with the ACC local policing this morning. There is a monitoring process and that is reviewed on a monthly basis. Clearly, people can go sick, maternity leave, decide to leave, etc. But we're currently at 100%. As I say, that's monitored on a monthly basis and someone has got specific responsibility for that. Just in terms of the on-the-job training, if you like, PCSOs are part of that wider neighbourhood team now. So there's a dedicated sergeant responsible for monitoring delivery of the neighbourhood policing guarantee. You'll be well aware that that's tied not only to having people in certain roles, but extremely stringent rules about what those officers can do. There are some things probably that the public would be quite surprised that don't fall within that framework. So, for example, looking after or investigating missing from home children doesn't count as a neighbourhood task under the current rules, nor does dealing with repeat domestic abuse. To my mind, those are exactly the sort of issues I think people would expect their beat officers to be aware of and dealing with on an ongoing basis, and we'll make representations. And we had conversations where I think you'd like to have the evidence base to potentially make representations about that, because I think it's right that there is some rigour around what we can use the beat officers for to minimise the abstractions. But equally, there are some things I think squarely sit with beat teams. And if there is a long-standing issue with a child who goes regularly missing, my submission would be that the local beat officer who knows the family would be in a far better place to deal with that than a response officer on a rotating shift pattern. So we'll make those representations. In terms of the abstraction rate, abstractions for the first quarter of the year have been higher than normal. For April, it was 12%. For May, it was up at 23%, and June at 13%. Usually, we aim for no higher than 10%. I would just say, whilst it's not the position we want to be in, we have been facing some exceptional demand. We recently had an evening where we had, I think it was a Wednesday, it wasn't one of the peak nights. We had more 999 calls than we've ever experienced in the force before, and that includes New Year's Eves. We've had a number of significant operations. You'll be aware of the operation in Crewe in April, where we had 500 officers involved in a action at Webb House in Crewe. That has had an ongoing impact on us in terms of both the investigation, the public protection, and managing the ongoing demonstrations. I think it's fair to say that the general public around that facility in Crewe have been tremendously law-abiding. They have concerns which are quite legitimate, and we need to look after those concerns. But I think we see the phenomenon of citizen journalists, YouTubers, who turn up with a vested interest of creating an issue to film it to get YouTube hits. Yeah. That presents a problem, as we need a policing presence there to manage it, but that, together with other things, has caused the abstractions. Further abstractions everyone will be aware of is we've had a very hot period. We know that during those times crime tends to increase. We get more nighttime economy. We've had a World Cup. Some of the last-minute provisions around licensing have not been helpful for planning. We were informed of a change of licensing laws on one occasion on a Friday for a game that was taking place on a Sunday. That leaves us with very short timescales, and the level of planning that we would normally do weeks or months in advance just doesn't happen, and everyone's got to pitch in. So I make those points just to say, yes, they have been higher than we would anticipate, but the aim is to maintain them below or at that 10% level. But at least when we've gone over it, there are clear reasons why in this case that we can point to hopefully articulate to the public who would understand why we've had that extra demand.
Yeah, I think abstraction rates of 13% versus desired levels of 10 are absolutely explainable when you think about the significance of, well, the weather that is going on, and we know that there is a correlation between good weather and drinking a bit too much and some of the consequences that there can be for policing more broadly. You've obviously made reference to that all-time high day of 999 calls, which I appreciate are obviously going to have a huge impact on neighbourhood policing, especially when there's response changes, and the World Cup, which obviously doesn't happen every year, although it would be nice to think that we might stand the chance if it was every year. But what I would say is that it's explainable, which I think is the important thing. Yeah. Even that deviation, that 10%, feels like it's explainable to the public, which is important through all of this. Well, thank you for that. Look, can we now move on to slide 6? The report shows that neighbourhood crime outcomes have improved significantly. I'm sure you'll be able to, but can you explain what you're doing to achieve this?
Yeah, and I've shared with you previously, we get the national data sets that talk about the outcome rates and charge rates across the country, and I'll make reference to some of those. I would love to be able to share these, but we're not allowed to because it's in effect a league table of forces across the country. The steady picture is that you can see there the red one at the top is Cheshire. Yep. That's pretty much the picture for all the major crime categories, which obviously we're really pleased about. In terms of the outcomes, they are one of the things I would cite. Clearly the public have an interest in things such as the workforce mix. I would ask people really to look at the results though. You know, crime's down in key areas, more people are brought to justice. So I'd encourage people to have the confidence that with whatever resource we get, we are using it effectively, and that translates into the overall position together with, of course, HMIC's grading. In terms of those improvements in neighbourhood crime outcomes, is a whole force effort. That starts with the force control room, making sure that we get those calls out quickly so that if someone is in need of the police, one, we pick up the phone quickly, and if it's an emergency situation, we get there quickly, because that gives us a far better chance of detecting those crimes. Our incident response times remain outstanding, generally over 90% for any emergency call, which when you consider the size of the county is impressive. At the recent Chiefs Council, there was a discussion about changing the national standard to 20 minutes for a rural area. Some forces already do that. We maintain we're going to keep the 15-minute target for rural and urban. We're hitting over 90% now for it, and public in rural areas deserve a speedy response to people in urban areas, and we work really hard to make sure that we achieve that. We recognise that people in rural areas can feel more vulnerable, so it's an absolutely key thing that we monitor to make sure that we get to people really quickly. We've got a range of investigative options, so the more complex offences clearly might go to Serious and Organised Crime Unit. In terms of anything major crime, whether it's homicide, for which we've got the highest charge rate in the country, or serious offences, the major incident team can assist. We are making, I'd say, outstanding progress in terms of our detective numbers. The establishment for detectives, I think we're currently at 91% filled, so that's people trained or in training to become detectives. They deal with the more complex matters, and I think that's reading through, and again, into some of the charge rates and outcome rates that we see. As of November 2022, we moved from 5 response shifts to 4 response shifts to form area investigation teams. They were quite challenging for the staff because we had a lot of inexperienced staff, but I think 3.5 years later, we're really seeing the benefit of that. Our outcome rates are really positive, certainly the best in the country across the board. And just looking at the charge rates, in terms of what we're achieving, all crime, highest charge rate in the country. Particularly important, I think, for neighbourhood crime, burglary, highest charge rate in the country. Residential burglaries, highest charge rate in the country. Another neighbourhood crime, vehicle crime, second highest charge rate in the country. Our neighbours in North Wales top the pops for that one, so well done to them. Vehicle interference, joint top. Robbery was 6th, but that has seen significant improvement. We were down in the lower quartile probably about 18 months, 2 years ago, so I think that's significant improvement. In terms of retail crime, second highest charge rate in the country for shoplifting, and some really important ones, the high harm, so sexual offences, highest charge rate in the country, other sexual offences, highest charge rate in the country, violence against the person, which I think relates to our approach in no small portion to domestic abuse, highest in the country, violence with injury, marginally second to South Wales, violence without injury, highest in the country, stalking harassment, highest in the country. So when we're looking at outcomes across the board, but particular reference to neighbourhood crime, I think the public should have a high degree of confidence that if someone commits a crime, particularly a serious one, the more likely to be brought to justice in Cheshire than anyone else in the country.
I mean, look, it's good news, and I'm also impressed that you've found a way to share some of that information without upsetting our neighbours and other police forces in the country, which is a good way to get the good news out. I mean, I will absolutely say what I'm hearing is that there isn't one single action that has led to this. It's a culture of continuous improvements, marginal gains where you can across policing, all part of a whole policing approach to improving for the whole county. So, I mean, it's a really good, positive news story against what often in public service is quite negative news about having to do less year on year. And I know that there's difficult financial circumstances ahead for all public services, but it's reassuring to think that there is good news out there when it comes to safety, which obviously is one of the most important parts of everyone's life in this county. I will pick up on a point around rurality. I mean, this office has been working hard with partners in the local authority and Digital Cheshire to understand about some of the black spots that exist for connectivity in this county. Because one of the things that I'm alive to is that people, especially those in rural areas, will have a crime that maybe isn't an emergency but falls into that non-emergency category, but don't have mobile connectivity reported online easily in the same way they do in an urban area, and don't have the ability to make a phone call either in some cases, which is obscene, but that is, if you travel around this county as much as you and I do, I'm sure you are used to losing connectivity all the time. So I think that is interesting that there are new masts coming on all the time, and in fact in one particular part of the county it seems as though there's a whole big mast about to come online in the Farndon area, which, who knows, you might actually start to see extra demand as a consequence of that. But the point is connectivity is a priority to make sure that people in rural areas can actually report things that are happening. My next question really is that other than crime outcomes, what measures do you use to assess the effectiveness and the impact of the neighbourhood policing teams?
Yeah, and I think it probably links into the previous thing about the really strong outcomes. But what we see is across the board in the force a really positive culture of delivering the best quality service for the public. So clearly charge rates, crime volumes lend themselves to numeric assessment because there's data there that you can assess. One of the pleasing things for me, and I think it's manifest of the leadership culture and the performance culture that we've now engendered in the force, is that a whole range of departments where it isn't so easy to gather metrics are being recognised by the appropriate bodies for outstanding performance. So, for example, our firearms licensing are the most effective team in the country for managing firearms certification. When you consider that Cheshire is a partially rural area, has a significant number of licensed shotgun holders, for example, that's important that we give a quality of service to those people. In terms of our vetting service, again, recognised as national best practice, our vehicle fleet. I could go on with a number of the departments, but the important thing is, I think, that we're not just picking off elements of what we're supposed to deliver to the public. We're engendering across the board with leadership at all ranks and the staff that it's important to give the best quality of service. So I think that's what we've inculcated the staff with across the board. So in terms of the broader measures as well, we've obviously got the statistics around confidence surveys. We get good results from the Crime Survey of England and Wales. I think somewhere in the pack there's the figures, so we score really well in terms of public confidence in us as a police force, and again, that we are doing a good job towards the top end of both of those things, and that's a really important metric for us, that the public do recognise that we're performing well, that we are here to give them a service, and that is recognised in the independent Crime Survey of England and Wales.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously, in the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, we host our citizens' assemblies, and our next one is going to be the Northwich local policing unit. I mean, one of the things that we make sure that happens is that those sat around the table, and there's many tables at these things, but you have people who have maximum trust in policing around that conversation, but also people who have no trust in policing. And broadly speaking, I would say that people leave those assemblies, which obviously run for a number of days, with a huge amount more of respect as to what happens in policing and keeping this county safe, and dispelling some myths and rumours that do exist. That said, there'll always be some people who have been failed by policing at some point, and we may never be able to repair that damage. That's probably the case for most public services. When something is done wrong, whether it's in this area or somewhere else in the country, that happens, and we also have to respect that. But it's reassuring that sort of quality of service is marked on more than just crime outcomes. There's a whole suite of things that are put into assessment. My next question really is an acknowledgement that we've revised the neighbourhood policing model, and obviously a huge amount of public scrutiny around that. But can you evidence that the revised model is delivering improved outcomes to local communities yet? I appreciate it's still early considering those changes.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, the actual model's not changed. The workforce mix. The mix,
yes. Yeah.
It's important because we think we have a very solid model. As a constabulary, since I've been here, but in fairness, predating me, where some forces kind of slashed and burned neighbourhood policing during financially strained times, Cheshire's always maintained a really strong beat presence. So the model's not changed, the staffing mix has. In terms of whether that's working, I would again point to the crime reductions around key crimes. I think last year we had a stunning result with burglary crime. Burglary was significantly down, as were the majority of crimes. And then again, the outcomes in terms of key crimes, vehicle crime, burglary, robbery, and some of the violence that goes on in our communities. People should have real confidence that we are getting positive outcomes and bringing people to justice. I think beyond that, not just the charges, but we have a range of things that we are robustly applying. So in terms of community protection notices, taking out various orders, DVPNs, targeting problem premises, we are prolific, I would suggest, closure orders for those places that blight their local communities and people who can't seem to behave. So I think there's a whole range of measures where people should take confidence for us. In terms of some of the things about the engagement, part of the neighbourhood policing guarantee, but something we do anyway, the commitment is for surgeries every 6 weeks, 10 visits to schools every 6 weeks, 4 visits to places of faith, messages going out via Cheshire Alert, and obviously regular contact with Neighbourhood Watch. So I think as well as doing a really good job, we are keen to communicate and engage so that we have that two-way conversation with our communities and they are aware of everything that we're doing to try and protect them.
Yeah, and I think the revision I'm talking about is the reflection of that change in workforce mix. And the reason why I say that is that there is a real sense of connection between PCSOs and the public, and that change can feel significant, and certainly based on the correspondence that I've had with members of the public, it has been significant to some, but I appreciate for many members of the public it will be business as usual when it comes to neighbourhood policing. I'm now going to move on to ASB. I am mindful that school holidays are either starting or just around the corner, and I've launched my swap fund, which is using proceeds of crime money to support young people and divert them into other activities as opposed to getting mixed up in ASB and crime. And we've been very alarmed by the increase in tragedies that we've had nationally involving young people and open water. And we've also provided funding for what we believe is the UK's first county-wide water safety champions programme, which will deliver specialist water safety training in schools across Cheshire. We launched it recently and we've had a huge response from the public of support. And the aim obviously is to ensure that young people understand the risks associated with rivers, reservoirs and open water environments, which Cheshire has more than its fair share of, and with a very small access to the coast, and we know an awful lot of people use open water instead. And I've also seen the Constabulary are very alive to this, having done a series of awareness campaigns recently. Well, how do you think that neighbourhood policing is going to manage ASB over this summer period?
So I think the approach, and it's generally the most effective approach across many things, is we've got a top-down and a bottom-up approach. The bottom-up thing is that we've got a strong coverage of neighbourhood and beat teams who understand the problems in their area. We've got problem-solving teams and that connectivity, so we understand the issues. Top-down bit is around the strategic governance. So strategic lead who will hold to account the tactical lead. Each of the local policing units, of which we've obviously got 9, will be linked into the force action plan, and we rigorously govern those to ensure that we're identifying issues that come up and that there's a commensurate plan being applied to it, and that plan works, so it's continually reviewed. So there's a layered plan in each of the policing units. We have a beat management TAT review of ASB hotspots every week. Things can change. We can lay out plans around the summer due to summer holidays, other key events that we see throughout the year, whether it's Halloween or something else. But then we can be dependent on things such as the weather. So, for example, we've seen the tragic incidents around the open water. When we know we're going to have a particularly hot weekend, we will endeavour to make sure that we've got additional resources in the right place together with partner agencies. So we have really strong plans throughout the summer. But also we've got a beat fleet of foot, and that's really the benefit of having that coverage with the beat teams, the 122, and everything else that lays over it to make sure that we can adapt and flex and actually do something meaningful with it, whether it's engagement or enforcement.
It's reassuring because even yesterday I was on a meeting with representatives from Pickmere, which is a part of the county that is renowned for its beauty and its open water, and the vast majority of people who go there follow the law, do things right and proper, but it doesn't take very many people to do something that doesn't fall into that criteria, and actually it becomes an absolute nightmare for residents. And this has probably been a constant for you, Chief Constable, the whole time that you've been Chief Constable here, that Pickmere has been a challenge, let's say. But I think what is reassuring is from you there saying around looking at whether, understanding that operational decisions will be considered around what is happening and moving resources. And I know last summer there was a noticeable increase in policing around Pickmere because I got a correspondence from stakeholders there saying we've noticed something, like, you know, and I know the parish council also contributed somewhat. But I think we've got to be serious about how do we sustainably fund this sort of work. It's very hard to do, and often it means local communities having to make bigger contributions to a local pressure, which can feel unfair, but sometimes that's what has to happen if you're to get the sort of resources that you want in the long term.
I think, you know, we need to have a straight conversation with some of the communities as well, because we've looked at the issues there. There was the incident where it didn't actually contribute to a sad outcome, but could have done, where a fire engine couldn't get where it needed to get because of parking. Now our resolution in part will be to have more WL lines, parking restrictions, then we'll go down and enforce it. So we sometimes get messages that residents say, this is terrible, you must sort it out. But as soon as we give a parking ticket to a residence, we're being oppressive on what we're doing there, and we've got nothing better to do than give out parking tickets. So we'll deal with it. You know, we've had the conversations with fire. Ultimately, it's one of those where, of course, we'll listen to the public, but if it comes down to an issue of public safety, we'll do the right thing. So if that's enforcement, it'll be enforcement. We'll work with the communities to understand it. But sometimes the solutions aren't within our gift. But if we have to do the right thing, we'll do the right thing, and then we'll communicate with people. But there's not all... The optimum solution isn't always to send ever more police officers to a particular hotspot.
Sure. I'm alive to that, yeah. Okay, can we move on to slide 7? And people who join these sessions will know that I regularly ask questions around complaints, which is what this slide is related to. Can you tell us where things are going wrong? We can see there are some peaks in there, where standards are slipping, and importantly, whether the organisation is learning from mistakes. And I say that as a critical friend in this space, that complaints are an important part of listening, and one of the themes of my police and crime plan is listening to the public. So can you just extrapolate a bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say things are going wrong. I mean, the first thing when a complaint's made, sometimes it's justified and will take action. Other times they're not found that the officer's done anything wrong in the particular circumstances. But they're all appropriately investigated. We put an awful lot of effort into understanding the nature of complaints, because it's a key way for us to identify issues and then try and take remedial action. Quite often that will be training, and we've changed processes. It might be a different process, it might be different scrutiny. ACC crime has been, ACC local policing has been on an absolute mission about use of force forms, and we've had a real drive on those being completed in every incident. Now, without the knowledge that we've had that drive on it, you might look at the increase in submission of use of force forms and think the force is suddenly using an awful lot more force on the public. That's not the case. We're recording it better. The public are probably surprised to know that if I arrest someone, put my hand on him like that, that's a use of force. If someone's compliant but a potential risk and we put handcuffs on, that's a use of force. And if Mike, I and Vicky arrest Paul, we're all putting a use of force for me. So it's necessary we need the information, but the bureaucratic overlay of some of these things is quite significant, but we recognise that we do it because from that information we identify if there are any issues, and as I say, we can take some remedial action. So in the last year there has been an increase since June of last year. The majority of complaints seem to relate to a number of different areas, both in terms of policing activity, geography, and in the nature of the issues. In the main, it appears to be in relation to general service related, such as crime updates, outcomes, action taken following a call for service. So that's really important for us to understand. If the public have a perception that we're not doing what they expect, we have to understand that if we need to get better, we'll get better. If we think actually it's an unrealistic demand, that we can give that feedback to try and educate the member of the public. As you know, we're looking at AI to try and make our efficiencies more effective. In some cases, it's a curse as well as a blessing. We are seeing a significant increase in the number of AI-generated or assisted complaints, most of which bizarrely seem to want, quote, American legislation and the Bill of Rights at us, just explaining to us how we really don't understand the law and they know better. So that's generating a significant amount of work which has to be dealt with and responded to. But unfortunately, we can't just get our AI to speak to their AI. So someone has to look at it and make a valued judgment. We've obviously had an awful lot of new officers joining us. We recruit an absolute great quality of people. I speak to every recruit intake, and I'm really pleased with the recruitment. We get very bright people. We get people with a good, varied background with a mix of age and experience, and then I think we give them really good training. But people are inexperienced. We throw our most inexperienced people into the most demanding situation. So we very much take the view that where they make an honest mistake, that's a development issue, and obviously we want to invest the time in them to make sure that they continue approve as officers. Any complaint data is shared with local command teams across the force on a quarterly basis. They discuss them with chief officers at the quarterly performance review, and we pick up thematic issues. As you've alluded to, obviously there's significant scrutiny from the OPCC, more serious matters the IOPC, and we have various community groups who oversee use of force, will review body-worn video. So we absolutely intend to be transparent with everything we do, open ourselves up, and if there is learning, we'll take the learning.
Thank you for that. That's quite an explanation. Is there a clear end state that the force is trying to get to? So in other words, what does success look like? And is there a target or a benchmark that would allow the public and this panel to judge whether there is action being taken in response to complaints?
Well, I think we we can measure our response in terms of timeliness, the nature of the response, whether we're identifying issues. I don't think we'll ever have zero. We're never going to have zero. We're a very proactive police force. We've significantly increased the number of arrests. The fact of the matter is, not everyone likes being arrested, and one of the tactics is people would complain. So if we're taking more proactive, positive action, that is going to generate a greater pool of people who will have a grievance against us. But we have significant amounts of oversight. We want to address complaints in an evidence-led way by understanding a problem and applying a control measure. We will never set a target to reduce the number of complaints coming into us, in the same way that we'd never impose a target to reduce sexual offences or domestic abuse. We want reporting. So I wouldn't advance that we'll ever set a target for it. Clearly, we want to see it reduced, but we want to see it reduced on the back of evidence, actions that we've taken in a specific field. So I think we have rigorous oversight of it. I think we take the measures that we need to take. We'll never get it to zero. I won't want it to get to zero, but I'm really confident that the levels of scrutiny that we apply and other bodies apply put us in a very healthy place.
I think there'll be members of the public who would hear that and be surprised but reassured that there isn't a culture of getting rid of complaints, because complaints are a reflection of the service. So it's an important feedback loop. Some of it inevitably will be complaints for complaint's sake, and I think we're all alive to the fact that that happens. But the fact that Chief Constable is saying that this is an important part of learning about the effectiveness of policing in our county, I think is a really important statement. And I think it talks about the transparency by which policing is done in this county to the public. So I welcome that sort of honest clarity. I think it's very important. You spoke about use of force, and I'm now going to move on to slide 8, which does refer to use of force, and we can see a significant increase there. I mean, use of force is an area that understandably does attract significant public interest, and you've already mentioned today what exactly use of force can mean. This report shows that the use of force forms have increased by 28%, which is a significantly sharp rise in the last 2 months. Is this increased compliance, or is more force being used?
Well, I think I'd go back. I think it shows we've got a really effective ACC local policing, because she's been laser focused on this. She's driven the education about it, and as I've said, we want to know. This doesn't, to me, reflect the fact that we are using significantly more force or more widespread force on the public. It means that we're recording it. There might be some genuine increase in there. We've obviously had the issues in Crewe, where a large number of people have come into contact with us and been arrested in many cases, but I would definitely put this down to the fact that we are now getting tighter and tighter on the documenting of it. I think our recording, we're seeing it, it's getting more accurate, it's going to get better. We take the learning from that, we identify it. So recently, we saw anecdotally, so we've tasked out the piece of work of more of our female officers being assaulted by female members of the public. So we want to understand that. We want to understand that if there's a training thing there, whether there's any reticence on the part of officers to use force on female members of the public. So it's a trend, it might be an anomaly, but we want to look at it, we want to understand the reasons. Equally, we're seeing a lot more assaults by juveniles on police officers. So again, we're looking at it to try and understand what the reasons are and come up with cogent, evidence-based plans to deal with it, to try and make sure that we're dealing with it in an appropriate way. So that applies exactly the same with our use of force. Are we using it in an appropriate way? Clearly, if force is used on a child, that will be subject to significant scrutiny by supervision. You'll be aware that we've got various community groups who oversee it. They oversee stop and search. They'll review the body-worn video. So again, we aim to be perfectly transparent and demonstrate and explain to the public if we've used force, why we've used force.
I mean, I know there is a lot of scrutiny over use of force, and you've just given some trends there which I think are important to be sort of cognizant of. I mean, females offending female officers is something I think the public wouldn't be aware of if it wasn't for the fact that you are saying that. I think the other thing that is a surprise to some, but maybe not all, is around incidents of young people, and I think, you know, the Police and Crime Panel has been very scrutinising of me and my actions in this space, but I think we have to be alive to the fact that young people, and people more broadly, are spending a lot of time online, on social media. They are now being fed algorithms that normalises stuff that's not normal. I think if you watch a video of an officer being assaulted somewhere in the country, somewhere in the world, and you watch it more than a few times, you will get more material just like that. And we are seeing stuff more broadly become normalised because people are spending a phenomenal amount of time online and thinking that not normal behaviour is actually acceptable. And it's just one of the reasons why we're doing Phone Free Education. It's one of the reasons why I support the government's ban for social media for under 16s. But I think there's a lot of people opening up to the realities of hours every day on something that often isn't the real world, doesn't feel like the real world. And now with AI-generated content is often just absolute nonsense that young people are being exposed to. If I may now, I'm going to move us on to slide 9, which is total recorded crime and OB OBTJ. Can you give a quick explanation of what OBTJ means, including things like out-of-court resolutions, and why it's such an important measure of policing performance?
Yeah, probably the simplest explanation to members of the public, and it is a confusing phrase, it's where we've solved a crime. We know who's done it and there's been some sort of sanction applied. So that might be charge, it might be an out-of-court disposal, it might be some sort of restorative approach, but the important thing is we can give closure to the member of the public. We can say this is what's happened in this case and that some action has been taken. As I've outlined from the national charge rates, and Cheshire charges probably the most, is the most significant outcome for us. Where we do our job, CPS do theirs, and then it's up to the court to come out with a resolution. As I said, some offences where someone is a prolific offender, normally acquisitive crime, we will on occasions have offences taken into consideration. So that's where they'll be charged with a number of offences, but then they'll admit their guilt in the others. That's presented before the court to say there's all these additional offences which they've been guilty of. Yeah, so there's a whole range of things. I think we look to divert where it's the appropriate thing. Is this about education? Is it about some sort of substance abuse? So where that's the appropriate outcome, we'll seek to apply them. But yeah, generally we're pretty successful, I'd say, in terms of achieving a positive outcome for the members of the public. HMIC have recommended that. They've talked about our robust and effective governance structures to oversee crime, investigation, and Paul's team in particular, and the deputy who looks after daily performance. I think we've given our supervisors and staff the tools to do the job through our really widespread use of Power BI apps. So we don't ask the staff any random questions. Everyone knows the sort of things that we think are important. Everyone knows how we measure them. So there's no surprises for everyone. And by that consistent application of asking the same questions about the important thing, that's the thing that we seem to drive up performance with. In terms of outcomes and detections, a key element everyone will appreciate. You've mentioned mobile phones and electronic devices. There isn't a crime we deal with that doesn't have some sort of digital footprint. We have made a significant investment in our digital forensic unit over the last 5 years. I think we've quadrupled the number of staff in it. I think we're one of the few forces in the country that doesn't have a backlog for the examinations of computers and mobile phones. I think when I came back, some computers are waiting up to a year to be downloaded and investigated. Mobile phones, it was a similarly depressing picture. So we've made the investment, and now that contributes significantly to many of the positive outcomes that we see.
Look, there's a lot you've said there which aligns with the pledges that are in my policing crime plan. So it's reassuring, to say the least. But prevention is a key priority of mine. And whilst we've said an awful lot of positives so far today, the out-of-court resolution panel observes frequently that opportunities are being missed with offenders when applying conditions. So my question really is this something that the Constabulary are working on to improve?
I've got to say this is one that I'm not aware of.
Okay.
If there is some specifics that you can let me have, certainly have a look at it. These are subjective, but please give me the detail, and then we'll have a look at it and see if there's something that we need to address.
I mean, we'll definitely make sure that happens, because this, it's clear that Cheshire has got a lot to be proud of when it comes to outcomes being brought about, and we want to, as part of that culture of continuous improvement, we want to make sure that we go from strength to strength. I think the final question I'd have in relation to this is the new sentencing legislation having an impact on Cheshire? And I will, before you answer that, I will stress that this is a standing item on the Cheshire Criminal Justice Board, because we want to make sure that all partners in the criminal justice system are alive to it. And I will also stress that the sentencing legislation is a reflection of the fact that over the last 10 years plus, this country has grown by 10% in population. Cheshire's had more than its fair share in that growth. Yet our prison capacity has grown by 0.5%. I don't think anybody in this room or anybody in the criminal justice system really wants to be making the changes that have had to be made. But we equally cannot have a one-in, one-out policy when it comes to law and order in this country. So, yeah, going back to the actual question, is the new sentencing legislation having an impact in Cheshire?
So, just to take the question as written, the out-of-court disposal bit isn't touched on by that because it's taken out of the court.
Sure.
The sentencing act, yeah, it's starting to have an impact. In effect, the judges and magistrates are under really strict guidance in terms of the level of offending required to attract a sentence. In times gone by, you know, sentences of a year, certainly 2 years, fairly commonplace. They're being squeezed out of the system. I was discussing, funnily enough, with a defence solicitor from Manchester over the weekend, his view of it, and he's amazed that some of his clients who should be going to prison are not going to prison. The level of offending is really significant. I think it presents some challenges around some of the things that there is a lot of national focus on. So in terms of shoplifting and theft from retail, priority, and yet we are seeing recidivist thieves go to court and continually come out with a non-custodial sentence, which they're clearly aware of. Equally, in terms of assaults, including domestic assaults, some of them that may have attracted prison sentences before are not attracting prison sentences. We're gathering the evidence because I want to put a statistical base on it, as well as the view that we're seeing from our own experiences. And we're also nationally, the National Police Chiefs Council have asked all forces to submit evidence so they can make representations nationally to the Ministry of Justice and others in terms of what we're seeing. The impact that we're going to see is an increased level of offending by some people in the community. Hopefully, that whatever diversion schemes put in place will have an impact, but it won't for some. We're just going to see people at liberty committing offences. We'll continue to monitor that with our teams. And again, it's something I would like our beat management teams to be able to focus on more. But again, that doesn't, as I understand it, fall within the remit of the beat management teams. So if I have my beat management teams looking after recidivist offenders, domestic abuse or missing from homes, the Home Office will say, I'm not meeting the criteria and potentially take the funding offers. In terms of remands, we are taking the view that we're not going to second guess what a court might do or the CPS might do. So if we think someone needs remanding, we're sending them for remand. Since legislation has been introduced, remands are down by 8%. Prison recalls for people misbehaving when they've been let out on some sort of licence have increased by 12%, and people who are increasingly being tagged, tag breaches have increased by 29%. So I think it's fair to say, notwithstanding the difficulties, the problem has been passed from the prison service to the police and obviously communities.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is probably one of those areas that you get complete agreement across the criminal justice system that this is painful and we would rather this wasn't happening, but there aren't alternatives that are credible and realistic in that, in the short term, which you've got to solve them. I mean, we know how long it takes to build prison populations capacity, and there's already a significant amount of work that goes on to prevent use of prisons where alternatives will be better and swifter. I think one of the things that I am the most alive to is that reoffending rate for short sentences is over, so that's sort of less than 12 months, is over 60%, whereas reoffending for longer sentences is sort of closer to 30%. And I think what I've found with our ex-offenders to employment programme, which is working exclusively with probation now versus prisons, is that taking that person out of the circumstances of which their life is currently in, and this is the sort of rehabilitation that prison can do, is actually quite helpful in terms of getting them back onto a track towards mainstream society. And what we found is that not removing them from that chaotic situation that they may well have been in is therefore pretty hard to bring about the change that you want to get them to on a different track, to stop the reoffending. So there's challenges in this space, but I welcome the sort of transparency. I think it's fair to say nobody in this room and nobody in the criminal justice system wants to be having to do this, but the alternative would literally be an overloaded prison system and a one in, one out, which would be open season for criminals and organised crime more broadly. If we can now, we're going to move on to the next slide, which is slide 10 and relates to grade 2 responses. Another pledge in my policing crime plan that the police will be there when you need them most. And the report shows a significant improvement in grade 2 response performance compared with the previous year. What has delivered this improvement?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've probably seen steady improvement for a number of years now. Obviously, there's sometimes seasonal variations on that. HMIC, again, have recognised our improvement in that. In particular, they're pleased with the vulnerability and safeguarding team, VAST, because obviously it's not just about answering the calls, it's about doing something meaningful and particularly important, identifying any vulnerability in the call, which sometimes isn't always that obvious. We've improved the staffing in the force control room. We also, well, I took the decision a number of years ago now, we were hemorrhaging trained and experienced staff because Cheshire was paying less than all our regional competitors. So actually we increased the remuneration to a competitive level, and we also significantly increased the staffing levels within the FCC. And this is one of the challenges and complexities with the budget that you'll be well aware of. People are obviously very wedded to the PCSOs and want to see those numbers maintained, but that comes out of the same budget as staffing for the force control room. That isn't as immediately apparent to members of the public. It's apparent to them if they can't get the phone answered, though. And that's some of the challenges that, you know, in terms of the operational delivery, we're of course acutely aware of what the public tell us, but that's where we need the professional judgment as well to say there's bits of the business that are actually hidden from the public. But if we don't get it right, then the impact of that will not be hidden on them. We work with the control room and our various analytical teams to understand where demand comes from, where should the patrols be at what time of day, so that we try and proactively make sure they're deployed in the right areas. You'd be aware of the DITASK plotting, an analytical tool which we're investing in. And again, that will be another layer over that to make sure that we've got the right people in the right place at the right time.
I mean, yeah, it's a good point that you're making, especially with regards to call handling and budget challenges and resourcing appropriately. I think I have conversations with members of the public a lot, and there is a narrative that is out there that you can be on for 101 for half an hour, 40 minutes, and that is probably based on the last time that they used 101, which could well have been 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and there has been a significant reduction in average time wait on that. So I always try and emphasise people, if you've tried it recently... Don't say ring again, see how long it takes. No, if you've tried it recently, you probably won't experience something like that. Of course, there can always be odd things that happen, but broadly speaking, the average time is within a few minutes.
Yeah, I think we'll give you, as of today, if we can. I share your frustration because, you know, I'll get correspondence and someone will say there's no point in ringing 101, you'll be on 40 minutes, 30 minutes. That was the case, it's not now. Yeah. Because of the investment we've put in place, it fluctuates on a daily basis, but generally between 3 to 5. Would say?
Usually around 3.5, 4 minutes.
Yeah, 3.5, 4 minutes. So that's the average. 999 calls are normally well within 5 seconds. We prioritise that. So again, I don't know whether you've rung... Sorry, Mike's dramatically entered. So in April it was 3 minutes and 7 seconds. May, 3 minutes 31 seconds. I've mentioned June's been busy, so it's 4 minutes 18 seconds. So they're the monthly averages. So this 30, 40 minutes, it's you know, it's something that is a long time ago. I was saying, I don't know whether anyone's trying to ring Sky, the Inland Revenue, British Gas, you'll be on for a lot longer than 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So we recognise it. We will always prioritise the 9s, but I think we're giving a good level of service and certainly within all the national targets.
That's helpful. I've got a question now, which is from my call audit volunteers. But do you believe call handlers still build rapport and obtain the best information whilst managing demand and reducing waiting times?
Well, short answer, yes. I think we've always been complimented by HMIC in terms of the empathy our staff deploy when they're dealing with the public. I think the VAST team is a bonus in terms of that regard as well. Their sole purpose is to identify vulnerability and make sure it's a suitable response. Of course, at times of high demand, that puts pressure on people, the human. So they can be pressure, but I still think our people give a really good service, both in terms of the time to answer calls, but also the empathy and care that they deliver. We invest a lot of training. We have mentors within the FCC who continually monitor calls. If it's a particular issue, they'll give instant feedback to that member of staff, so they're not waiting a week and trying to remember a call that they might have made after taking another 100. So we are alive to it, and we do try and give that lifetime feedback. The staff have drop-down menus so that to deal with a particular incident, there'll be a checklist there to make sure that they're hitting all of the required information. But that doesn't, of course, there isn't a checklist for be kind, be empathetic, be patient. But that is something that is emphasised on the training. We're looking at AI in the control room to see if there's ways that can assist staff as well. So I think we've got really good quality staff. I think we've got the right staffing levels in there. The SAB kit that we use to manage the core function is a really good piece of kit, but we're not complacent, and we are looking how we learn from anyone else. And obviously AI is the thing of the moment, which we're looking to try and exploit and make sure that we get that appropriately to support our people.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've always been really impressed by the conduct of people who are taking calls, whether that's 101 or 999, frankly. But the idea that you can have a call 1 minute, which is clearly a very, very high pressure emergency that you are navigating through somebody through, followed by a call about something on the motorway, which maybe 100 cars have gone past and some of which have already reported, to then a call which is absolutely not an emergency or a non-emergency.
Pizza's late.
But it's somebody, exactly, and for the individual to be able to not know what's coming through, but try and manage somebody through that is an incredibly difficult thing that I think very few people ever experience, and you sort of absolutely have to take your hat off for their ability to pivot accordingly from crisis to non-crisis. If I can now, I'm going to move us on to slide 11, which relates to grade 3s. Now, we've asked questions like this in the past, but I think it's always helpful for those who join. What types of incidents typically receive a grade 3 response?
Grade 3 is a wide range of incidents. It's normally grade 3 where it doesn't require an emergency response or a priority response. Grade 1, as I say, we aim to get there within 15 minutes, normally there within 7 or 8. Grade 2, the priority call, the aim is to get there within an hour. We'll generally get there within 30-40 minutes. Grade 3 is everything else that doesn't require an emergency or priority, but we take the assessment that it needs a police officer to attend. On occasions, it might be at the request of the member of the public. People will ring the public and say, I want to see an officer, but not now. We're not Amazon. We are an emergency service. There should be a realistic expectation that if you want, the police will come. But on occasions, public wants to defer that, so that might fall into it. But generally, if there's no witnesses that can be lost, evidence can be lost, there's no immediate risk or vulnerability, then it might be scheduled for a grade 3 response. We've kind of worked our way through getting to a good position in 1s and 2s. There's now an awful lot of emphasis on grade 3s. We're looking at how we drive up that performance. It's currently good, but obviously We want to make it better. Again, frustration with the neighbourhood policing grant is we're not really supposed to use beat officers for grade 3s in some circumstances. Again, some of the stuff that features on grade 3 is, in my view, eminently sensible for a local officer to go, who has local knowledge, might know the family involved, again, and that would significantly assist us by taking some of the burden off the response teams.
Yeah, and you gave us some examples of that at the start, which I think we need to explore, don't we, and see if we can get performances adjusted as to what is appropriate use and what isn't appropriate use. Is there any risk attached to delayed attendance? And by that, what I really mean is the impact it has on engagement or victim satisfaction.
Well, we know that the sooner you can attend and deal with a member of the public, they're going to have greater satisfaction. But there's a resourcing issue. Yeah. So we will always prioritise an emergency where someone's been attacked, where there's a burglar in someone's house, where there's a crime that's ongoing. The priority is within the hour. It might be some golden hour. Could be a burglary where there's no longer a thief on the premises, where we need to attend and deal with the issue. So, yes, but we can't possibly aspire to get into everyone in 15 minutes because you'd end up...
But in relation to those grade 3s that you spoke about,
yeah,
that's the, you know, that delayed attendance, you know, do you think there's a risk around delayed attendance to those?
Well, yeah, I mean, the sooner we get to people, the better.
Yeah.
We understand that, but there's a simple capacity issue that we can't get to everything. So we prioritise on a sensible basis. They're all risk assessed. Again, something that we are applying particular focus to at the moment is ensuring that we properly scrutinise anything in a grade 3 to make sure there's no vulnerability. Mm-hmm. So even if the member of the public says, I don't want to see you now, we'll assess it. If we think there's a need, we'll obviously go quicker. So there will always be risk. We can't eliminate all risk. We can be as clever as we want. We can use AI. We can scrutinise anything that's not a 1 or 2, but we'll never eliminate risk. What we've got to do is that we sensibly manage it and we keep reviewing it. So we'll keep reviewing it because sometimes time has a risk factor all of its own. So they are continually reviewed and assessed. We'll always strive to get better at it. Mm.
I think that's the idea that there are examples, which I think the public at large won't necessarily appreciate, but there are examples where people are trying to delay a police officer coming to their property because of their own time constraints. I think that will be the first time that many people have heard of that, because normally everything else is secondary to the safety of your home, of your assets, of your family, you know. And I think you stressing that there are occasions, sadly, where people are wanting to prioritise something else over police investigation is a bit of a reality check, and we want to encourage those people. And I say this as a member of the public and the voice of the public in this, we should always make sure that we don't get in the way of getting the very best outcome we can for safety in this county. And that sometimes means if you think that this isn't a priority, you need to very quickly reprioritise it. Mm. Okay, let's move on to slide 12, which relates to domestic abuse. Now, I know this is an area that Cheshire, like others, is leading, but has been a pioneering force for quite some time now. And it remains one of the most harmful and complex crimes types that is faced by policing. And the report shows a slight reduction in recorded domestic abuse offences. What assessment has the Constabulary made as to whether this reflects a genuine reduction in offending, changes in reporting behaviour, or other factors?
Yeah, I'd slightly clarify. I think Cheshire leads and others aspire to get to where we are. We've taken a really robust approach over the last 5 years to this. I would never over-celebrate a reduction in this crime type. Mm-hmm. I'm cautious for the reasons we've kind of spoke to. We want to make sure that people respond. That said, we've increased our positive action and arrests on this so that, again, the arrest rates in 2021 for domestic abuse incidents, we were arrested in probably 22% of the incidents we attended. We're now arrested in 55 to 60%, so we've trebled in effect. If we're taking positive action, and people know that they can't assault their partner or someone in the house with impunity, at some point that will have a positive effect on them, because they'll understand that there are consequences for action. In addition to arrest, obviously we work with IDVAs, a range of charities, to provide support to victims, to diversion, for perpetrators. So it's not just arrest everyone, although we do arrest a lot of people. It is a broader approach as well to try and get to the root cause of those issues. I think this is one to keep watching. I'm not going to declare any sort of victory that we've kind of taken positive action that's driving down offending, because the important thing is that if anyone is suffering domestic abuse, they know that we will treat it really seriously. Our focus is getting the best outcome for the victim. So we'll keep looking. I've mentioned having the highest charge rate in the country for assault. That's in no small part driven by our approach to domestic abuse. We've got the highest charge rate in the country for stalking and harassment. We have got a fantastic harm reduction unit, as you're well aware, one of only 4 in the country. I'm staggered that we are only one of 4 of 43 forces that have that. Every force should have one. Again, obviously, welcome your support in trying to sustain the funding for that. That's really important. So there's a whole range of things that we apply to this. So yeah, of course, it's better that we're seeing less victims of domestic abuse, but let's be cautious because it's important that anyone who suffers it comes forward and knows that we'll properly support them.
I think one of the things that has hugely impacted my experience of policing in this county is how this has gone from being something that was considered a crime but hard to deal with to where it is now, and over many, many years of hard work, absolutely sort of foundational for what the constabulary does. And I say that having had conversations with members of the public who historically would say that they've been failed by policing in this space, but also are impressed by the turnaround that you can see. Now, I've had, our Citizens' Assembly, this often is an area that we go into great detail with on one of the 3 sessions, and we have senior officers give effectively testimonies to a group of people about what's happened within policing since they've been an officer, from where it used to be to where it is today. No longer is it viewed as a domestic, and now it's dealt as entirely differently. And I think the other thing I would say is that there are members of the public who think that we've got new crimes that have appeared elsewhere that used to be old crimes that have sort of vanished and have come back. And I think in part the confusion there is that this is a historic crime that has never had the level of resource that it should have had, but is now getting resource appropriately and is often hidden, but it's real. And for victims and survivors of it, and I don't just include the individual who's on the receiving end of abuse directly, maybe physical, but those children who've witnessed officers arrive to homes and leave previously, whereas now they see officers arrive to home, ask them questions, understanding what's going on at home, and often a real change happens immediately. I mean, it's absolutely a credit to policing broadly that what's happening in Cheshire is happening. And you're right, there's 4 HRUs in which Cheshire is one of them. So this is an area which I've no doubt you have lots to be proud of as Chief Constable during that change, but the public in Cheshire won't necessarily realise how significant the change has been for them. But it's hugely reassured me that the Constabulary has took this serious over many years, and we're in the right direction of travel. And you're right to not be complacent for all the obvious reasons, but that data is in itself very interesting, and I'm sure people in the broader criminal justice system nationally will have a real interest as to what's happening in Cheshire, and is there something happening where we're starting to turn the corner on one of the worst crimes that's often been sort of ignored.
Well, we're just doing some research with Liverpool University around domestic abuse to try and better understand it, because we've got a decent data set now. I mean, look, I've been in police in 33 years. I'm still shocked at the levels of domestic abuse and sexual offending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't think the public realise the scale of the issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Okay, I'm now going to try and move us on to domestic abuse outcomes, which is relating to slide 13, and I appreciate we're speaking at great length about some of this. But the report, again, demonstrates improved outcomes for domestic abuse investigation. Overall, improving outcomes is clearly a positive development, and it's equally important that victims remain supported throughout all of that, which is clearly a very difficult process. We all want to see better outcomes, but striving for outcomes can't come at the expense of how the victim and survivor experiences the investigation. How are you, as Cheshire Constabulary, doing this?
Yeah, I mean, the two things aren't in any way mutually exclusive. If you don't properly safeguard and support the victim, you won't have a successful outcome, because you need the victim and any witnesses to feel supported. So the two go hand in hand. And if we reach a stage where actually the prosecution isn't viable for whatever reason, you've still got to be in a position where you've safeguarded and looked after that victim. Equally, if you're going to go forward to a prosecution, you need to safeguard and look after the victim. It's the right thing to do anyway. So this isn't the only thing that matters is a charge or an outcome. This is do the right thing in the right way, and the outcomes will come. Absolutely, we put the emphasis, our public protection teams work on each of the areas. We have significant investment with them. One of the things that we're pushing nationally is our model, because we think that having a mix of skills available to deal with things on an area, which includes public protection and safeguarding specialists, it includes the CID, and in some cases it's the area investigation teams and the neighbourhood teams. If there is a successful factor to come out of this, it's by having all those people located on a single area who can work together to give a holistic solution. I don't think centralised specialist units work in isolation. They invariably collapse through the demand and don't give the best service. You know, a study from London's Victim Commissioner in 2023 showed in domestic abuse cases, victims' withdrawal was 2.7 times less likely when the suspect was arrested and interviewed. So we're doing the right thing, but we're doing it in chime with the academic work that is out there that says our approach is more likely to give a better outcome and keep people safe. You know, and we constantly stress to the staff, doing the right things at domestic abuse is homicide prevention. Mm-hmm. Because more people are murdered by someone they know than any street gang or anything else. And sadly, too many people end up being murdered by someone they're in a relationship with. Mm-hmm. So we constantly strive to make that point to the staff, because I've no doubt, and we'll never know who, but I think our approach to domestic abuse in Cheshire over the last 5 years has saved lives.
Mm-hmm. I've no doubt about it. And, you know, every morning when I get the report of incidents that the constabulary has dealt with in the previous 24 hours, domestic abuse and some of the most violent crimes that take place within families, within the domestic setting, is the thing that always jumps out, not just because of the sheer volume, but by just the fact that it's always often the majority of incidents that has been dealt with the night before. I think there's another question. I'm mindful that we are struggling with time already, but we've obviously got a few more slides to get through. There's another issue that I think it comes up a lot, but particularly because of this type of crime, that there are often counter allegations in domestic abuse related crime. How does the constabulary manage counter allegations fairly?
Well, we follow the evidence. We keep an open mind. We'll look at past history. We will look at independent sources of evidence, digital media investigations, and we will look for the holistic picture to understand it. We've recently had a serious job just in the last week where the suspicion is that someone committed an offence and then actually got someone else to stab them to provide I was defending myself. So we're aware it happens, we investigate it. We will approach things with an open mind. So yeah, that's just, it's ever been thus in investigations really, to keep that open mind and not jump to conclusions.
Okay, I'm now going to try and move us on to slide 14, which relates to sexual offences. Sexual offences remain an area of considerable public concern. for the benefit of those watching today, what types of offences in this space, the types of offences in the space are many, and the report shows that sexual offences continue to increase, and Cheshire is comparatively high amongst similar forces. Can you just elaborate a little bit more around the types of offences that happen in this space?
So, sexual offences, it falls under the Home Office counting rules. There'll be a range of offences which, include rape, sexual assault, exploitation, grooming, indecent exposure. So that's a broad set of crimes, and it's important to break that down into specific areas, because if you're looking to identify a series of indecent exposures, that's very different to trying to solve a rape in a domestic setting. Certainly we know that within a domestic setting, a lot of those offences have been underreported. One of the things that, again, I will repeat, we will never strive to... The aim is not to reduce the number of sexual offences. We want every report to be coming to us. I've alluded to the tables that we can't show you. Equally, there are tables for reported crime. When I look at those tables and I look at some of the urban areas that purportedly have less sexual offences per thousand than Cheshire, I'm more troubled by them than us. Because common sense says it's probably not the case. However, you know, that is as it is. My concern is that we appropriately record every report, that if we know about it, we can start dealing with it, that victims absolutely must have the confidence to come forward and report these offences to us. There is clearly more confidence in reporting. So we can point to the consent campaign that we ran in schools, which has been incredibly successful. That has driven some demand for us, because we now undoubtedly see an increase in offences being reported to us from a school setting. You know, I think there's a case that some young people weren't aware that certain things were offences. So I think by raising the awareness, we can correlate that there has been an increase in reporting. You see the daily summaries and the really serious offences, and the range of them is from historic 30-year-old offences, interfamilial offences, people who've come out of a relationship are now reporting, people in a relationship, people on a date that's gone wrong, people in a nighttime economy setting. There is a whole plethora within that, and we need to break it down and understand what they are, so that we can apply the appropriate control measures. So we spend an awful lot of time studying that to make sure that we're applying the right remedy to try and drive it down. So, yeah, not something we would push on our internal performance charts. Some of the things we push for a reduction, like burglary, because generally reporting a burglary is very accurate. So you need to understand that, and the way you apply measures can drive down burglary. We never apply a reduction target to certain crimes, hate crime, sexual offences, domestic abuse, because it's actually more important that people report to us, and we'd never see it as an objective to drive down that reporting.
I mean, you've mentioned about the consent campaign there, and I've no doubt that there are young people who've been part of that campaign, seen some of the role playing that was done on the production, and that has to some extent prevented a crime from happening. But I'm curious as to what preventative activity is being undertaken to reduce sexual offending more broadly.
As I say, it depends on the nature of offending. So in the nighttime economy, we're very proactive about training bar staff, the Ask Angela campaign, trying to make sure that our people, so that they address dangerous behaviour or risky behaviour in a nighttime setting. We've dealt with the schools as one approach dealing with that. We have profiles in relation to indecent exposure. We know that indecent exposure is a significant precursor to people's escalating pattern of behaviour. So I think we're very alive to that. We treat that extremely seriously. Indecent exposure cases get allocated to a detective. We don't just dismiss it. So it really depends on the different crime type, understanding it, and that's a different application of a measure to try and suppress it. You know, in terms of safer streets, you'll be aware of that. We have the nighttime economy buses. We'll get people out in the nighttime economy that are there as a safe refuge. We run Operation Vigilant. We identify, you know, it's one of the reasons why CCTV is so important, and you know the ongoing issues with Warrington. We see people in the nighttime economy as predators. So males on their own, hanging around, waiting to identify people coming out of licensed premises in a vulnerable state. So we will deploy specialist teams with specialist training in behavioural detection to look for those people. We will combine it with uniform operations to provoke some sort of activity in terms of the offender. We will then intervene with them to try and make sure that they're not in an area where they can pose a risk generally to females. So there's a whole range of things that we seek to apply, as I say, depending on the crime type.
Yeah. I mean, look, you make a really good point about the CCTV. I mean, look, one of the reasons why we made the intervention we've made in Warrington is because the funding that this office provides Warrington to do a lot of community safety initiatives was not going to be spent on interesting but valuable but interesting work, when at the same time we are turning off something as, or certainly stopping the live monitoring of something as foundational as CCTV, which we know and we can very clearly evidence the result it does. So transferring that funding from that interesting work to something more fundamental was, for me, a very important but necessary intervention. But yeah, it's a great example of what preventive activity takes place. Another question which relates to staff training, in particular trauma-sensitive places such as call takers and those who are dealing with complaints, so people are treated compassionately. I mean, this is clearly an area which is sensitive, but are all staff trained in trauma-sensitive practices?
So, well, obviously we prioritise those areas that are most likely to use the skills. Everyone receives training throughout their probationary period. You'll be aware of the goggles. VR. Yeah. Virtual reality headset. That was a massive investment in terms of making sure that all our people recognised vulnerability, particularly around vulnerable children, child neglect, and we saw a significant increase in the reporting and positive action by our people having the confidence to take children's protection. So yeah, we will do all those sorts of measures. In terms of the FCC, the initial training programme that all call handlers undertake receive extensive training on empathising with victims, including the effects of trauma. Call handler training includes the importance of empathy and considers techniques to ensure effective communication, such as the LEAPS model, which is listen, empathise, ask, paraphrase and summarise. They maintain a practical active listening workshop, considering how to frame the questions. We have workshops with victim empathy, with members of the public explaining the impact around particular crime types. And the other side of it, we recognise that this has a human impact on our people. So we're very alive at diffusing after traumatic incidents, the TRIM process where we will support people. There are referral mechanisms available, so if people deal with a particularly challenging or horrific incident, or if just the sheer volume of stuff that they're dealing with starts to be an issue, we're very keen that we proactively intervene and look after the well-being of our people before it manifests itself into a serious issue.
I mean, one of the reasons why I ask some of these questions, even though the answer might seem obvious to you or to the constabulary, is that when we do our assemblies, members of the public often raise things as, wouldn't it be good if, and we do an awful lot of myth busting in that to reassure the public that, well, that's actually already happening. And this is a good example of where people was, it wouldn't it be good if, you know, people are trained on what is, you know, trauma-sensitive practices and explaining that, well, actually that does happen. So I think you've given a good degree of clarity there for those who have raised this in the past, and again, busting some of those myths that exist around policing. Well, we've just reached the end of our meeting, but I'm just going to extend it by 10 minutes. if your time allows for that, so we can get through these final couple of slides, and we're both under pressure to do it as fast as possible. But if we can move on to slide 15, which relates to hate crime. I mean, this is a particularly significant impact because of the harm it can cause to confidence and cohesion and feelings of safety. And I had at the recent assembly that we did for Congleton, the actual assembly themselves wanted to go into hate crime, not prompted by the OPCC, but that was an interesting area that they had. And I think it surprised some of us because of what hate crime often looks like and the demographics overlaid with Congleton. It was a surprise compared to other areas. But the report does show improved positive outcomes. How are victims of hate crime supported throughout what are obviously quite difficult investigations?
Yeah, I think one of the important things to note with hate crime is it's very often driven by international events. Mm-hmm. You know, we see spikes around things that people are viewing on whatever media they use. Every hate crime investigation is a 10-point plan as part of the initial investigation, which includes a risk assessment and identifies the needs of the victims and then a requirement for support. Specialist support for hate crime victims is provided by a variety of agencies. Remedy, we signpost victims to other organisations such as Tell Mama, the Community Safety Trust, Security Trust, and other agencies who are there to support victims of hate crime. We also make referrals to third-party reporting centres and partners, conscious that people might, on some occasions, be reluctant to speak to us. So it's important that we signpost them to someone who can listen to them. The force has a Chief Inspector Hate Crime lead with sergeants who act as a point of contact on each local policing unit with a particular focus on it, and with a beat management inspector lead on each area. I think we've got, again, really strong governance around this. And one thing not to miss is our own officers and staff are subject to hate crime. So we've got a current internal campaign, Got Your Back, where we try and ensure that we give support to our people who suffer with this. I would like on occasions the court to take a more robust approach to it. We have members of our workforce who are habitually, generally racially abused. We try and ensure that our people all recognise it. It's never just part of the job for us. So that is something not to be lost, that our people suffer this as well during the course of just going about their daily work. So it's something we are alive to, and as you say, the outcome figures seem to show that we are moving in the right direction with it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really difficult area for policing. I'm alive to, and I think in part because there is people out there trying to confuse the public also about what hate crime is. You know, this isn't hurty words, as is sometimes termed to. And the reason why I was so surprised that Congleton wanted to go into this is that there was real division in the room around what it was and whether it was important or not. And actually, there were people who gave very real examples as to when they've been on the receiving end of a hate crime. And it absolutely shocked the individuals who thought that this was sort of hurty word related crime, and it so clearly was not. This was deeply threatening and a far cry from the sort of safety that Cheshire is renowned for. Are these improved outcome rates translating into a willingness to report hate crime, do you believe? And I accept that you did make the point around international events can create surges, so I accept that does it, that can in itself, but do you think these outcomes are translating into willingness?
It's difficult to say categorically, but a point I made before, successful prosecutions depend on people supporting the prosecution in a lot of cases. So I think the fact that we are seeing improved outcome rates would indicate that more people have the confidence to come forward and to work their way through the criminal justice system with us. So I'd take that as a positive indicator, but we're obviously always keen to take feedback from any community group if they feel that there's more we can do to support them. You reference hurty words. As a force, we're not into dealing with hurty words. Equally, some of this stuff has real consequences for people's lives. So it's striking that balance about dealing with the stuff that matters and makes a difference and makes people, you know, fearful, intimidated, and not. We desperately try not to get involved in squabbles where people need to frankly grow up a bit and not ring us.
Well, look, my last slide that I was going to ask questions on is relating to public confidence, which is slide 16, and obviously puts Cheshire in a very good position. And public confidence is at the heart of the policing crime plan. It's all too clear to me that if people don't have confidence in policing, well, it has a disastrous consequence in terms of reporting and then investigating and so on and so forth. And actually, I had some questions relating to the neighbour policing model, but I think you've already answered them so far on what you've said, especially in relation to the changes to the workforce makeup and obviously the recruitment that is planned for September relating to PCSOs. So it really does lead me now to close today's scrutiny session. The discussion has sort of covered a broad range of issues that matter greatly to the public, from confidence through legitimacy through to response times, neighbour policing, safeguarding and crime outcomes. And it just remains for me now to thank the Constabulary, the Chief Constable, for answering those questions that have been raised and doing so in a way in which is transparent and all part of that culture of building confidence within the public of this county. And again, thank you for the members of the public who've joined us online. And now I'll formally close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.